Hello fellow cinephiles, Film Guru here. Today I'm reviewing Three from Hell. This is Rob Zombie's new film, and this is the third film in the House of a Thousand Corpses and Devil's Rejects ultimate trilogy, I guess now. And this film takes place 10 years after what happened. It starts where we get to see what happened at the end of Devil's Rejects, that they were shot, that they survived, and they ultimately put in prison. Then the film skips forward, they're arrested and put into prison, and we see all this through video recording and interviews and newspaper clippings and stuff like that. And it's sort of done like a documentary at the start, which I really liked. And it feels a lot like Natural Born Killers. And the film once again focuses on crazy killers, Baby Firefly, played by Sherry Moon Zombie, Captain Spaulding, played by the late great Sid Haig, and Otis Driftwood, played by Bill Moseley. It really looks at their time in prison, that Captain Spaulding ultimately gets executed, and it looks at how Otis escapes and then helps Baby escape. Once they escape, they sort of unleash bloody mayhem. This film I really liked. I didn't expect to like this as much as I did. I like Rob Zombie, I'll watch his movies. I just find his stuff a bit grotesque and a bit over the top at times, but I think this is his most well-crafted film. And it takes its time in a way to tell its story. It still has those sort of gory and violent moments that he usually has in his films, but it's down to a minimal. And it really is an interesting film, I found. I like following these characters. I like how he tries to make you feel for these people, even though they're crazed killers. And you ultimately connect with them, just in the smallest amount. And I kind of like that. I think Zombie's a very fascinating director. He's very creative and he has an interesting storytelling style. Most of his films are set in the sort of 70s period because that's obviously something he really enjoys. Even though this did feel like Natural Born Killers in a way, it was its own thing. He moved away from that. And part of me was glad he did, and other part of me wanted more like Natural Born Killers. But I'm glad he made it his own thing, which he's really known to do. I really like how it feels sort of like interviews with Manson and stuff at the beginning of these killers and what they've done and the people they've hurt. And we get to see it from the warden's point of view and the doctors and the guards in the film as well. It just felt that period was really interesting to me, and I like what he's able to convey here. I think all the acting is solid to the point. Sid Haig only has a minimal amount of scenes because unfortunately he passed away during the making of this film. But he has his one sequence where he's interviewed and he gives this great piece of dialogue, and it's a great little moment he gets to have. The last moment in cinema that he has before he passes away. And I really like that. And I like what they did with his character. He was my favourite part of House of a Thousand Corpses, and I really liked his performance in Devil's Rejects. I think Zombie was able to get something out of him we hadn't quite seen before, but his moments are really great. Bill Moseley is really great here too, and he feels like a sort of Charles Manson-esque sort of character. He has his own philosophy. When they're coming to do filming and they're doing a documentary, he messes with them in a great way. He talks about how he's evil and his death and all these things, and he has some great monologues and great scenes in the film, and we sort of get to see a different side to him that we haven't seen in the two previous films. A much more fun side, a much more intriguing aspect to his personality and who he is as a person. I like that. For me, the real standout here is Sherry Moon Zombie. Zombie puts his wife in all of his films. I think she's great here. Baby's a kind of a crazy, over-the-top character, and I think Sherry plays in such a great way. She's really interesting, she's fun, she adds a lot of humour and sort of comical elements to the film. She's crazy, but she plays it in such a beautiful way that you sort of feel for her in a little way. There's a sequence in the film where ultimately a security guard that she's beaten up and broken her nose off puts her into this place where she gets attacked by these two other inmates. And how that scene unfolds is just great. She's a kind of character you just know that whoever messes with her is going to end up getting hurt, and I really like that. And she just has fun. She's having fun in this film, and she's still really fascinating actress and character in this film as Baby. He has some really great slow motion sequences with some really fantastic music over the top when she's walking down the corridor in the prison, and just she wears this Indian headpiece and she shoots bad guys at the end with a bow and arrow. I really loved that aspect to it, and I think she was fantastic, and I loved her so much in this film. In a lot of ways this felt like a western, especially towards the end of the film when they end up in Mexico in this small town, and ultimately people from their past re-emerge to seek vengeance on them for what they've done to their family members. And this sequence plays out like a Western. You've got these guys that show up and they have guns and stuff. And then, like I said, you've got Baby who's wearing an Indian headpiece and bow and arrow, and she takes guys out like that. And it just feels like The Last Stand. It just feels like these characters are older now, much older. And they're moving towards the end of their life rather than the beginning. And it's sort of like there's contemplative about what the future holds, about what happened in the past, about is there any point to life and purpose of what we're doing. And there's a really great conversation between Otis and Baby that really sort of conveys that in the smallest of ways, and I really like that. I just love this visually. It was just an extraordinary and interesting film. I think in a way it's his most creative. There are sequences in a bar towards the end of the movie that he plays with a variety of things, colors and images putting together and playing with different aspects of filmmaking. His choice of music is always brilliant. Obviously because he's a musician, but he puts these really interesting songs in these really shocking moments. There's a sequence that happens about halfway in the film where they've taken over this house and they're holding the people who live in the house hostage and they're about to kill them, and this one girl who's completely naked runs out the front of the house and she's ultimately chased down by Baby and killed. But there's this piece of music that's sort of light and fun, and it sort of feels like a happiness, and it's a real contrast to what's actually happening in that sequence, and I really loved that. I really like the ending of this. I don't think it has as good of ending as Devil's Rejects does, with Freebird playing in that end sequence, but I really like the ending here, because you don't quite know if these two are going to make it. And just the whole end sequence in the third act is just brilliant. Feels like a shootout at the OK Corral, like an old Western. And I like how he sort of kept the violence and gore to a minimum, and it made a much more interesting, engaging story. I know this film hasn't done real well. There are people who hate it and think it's stupid, and they think Sherry Moon Zombie's performance as Baby is way over the top. I disagree. I've seen all the zombie films, and Devil's Rejects up until this point was my favourite because I thought he was interesting in what he was able to do in that. It was a bit much at times, but it was still an interesting, engaging film. He was able to have us feel for these characters who do horrific things, but you feel for them as people. But I just feel like he's sort of learnt so much as a filmmaker about taking his time, telling interesting stories in his own unique style and way, and I thought this was a fitting ending to these characters. Even though it's a very beautiful and poetic ending in Devil's Rejects, I just felt this was a continuation of their characters and to see where they are now. I think the reason he crafted this is because he probably feels like that himself. He's getting older now and he has a few movies under his belt, but he's sort of evolving and growing as a man, as a person, and I think that's what's happening with his movies, and I look forward to seeing what he does next. Final thoughts. At the end, it's really about people feeling regretful in a way of what they've done and trying to move forward and trying to make sense of the crazy world and justifying themselves for their actions because of the way they feel the world is, that is violent and terrible. And they are conflicting characters. They've done horrific things, but you kind of care for them in a way. You kind of feel for them, and you can kind of, in the smallest of ways, the tiniest of ways, understand why they're doing what they're doing or what they have been doing. An evolution and evolving of the characters he created in House of a Thousand Corpses. I'm going to give 3 from Hell 4 out of 5. I thoroughly enjoyed this. I thought it was a really engaging and interesting film. It was a little violent at times and gory, but ultimately it was an interesting story. I love what he was able to do with the film, and I loved the way he was able to craft these characters and put them in a different light and showing us them as a more rounded character than something we'd seen before. Anyway, that's all from me today. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please hit subscribe down the bottom, follow me on Facebook. Otherwise, until next time, enjoy the movies.